I don't think any of the people shilling for Final Fantasy VII R are real Final Fantasy fans. I don't think they're fans of Final Fantasy or RPGs in general, or particularly Japanese RPGs. Maybe it's a bit of an overgeneralization. I'm sure there are a handful of people who maybe played the original release back in the 90s, but I find it very, very disheartening to see how many people are willing to come out and try to damage control this specific release. I've seen people talk about the visuals, the episodic release, the gameplay change. I've seen all of that sort of damage controlled and overhyped. The pacing of the game, in particular. I do have confirmation that Final Fantasy VII R does end before you leave Midgar, and it completely botches the Midgar portion of the game. It ruins several key plot elements, including the fates of Biggs and Wedge, Zack's backstory, Aeris's backstory, Cloud's backstory, Tifa's personality. I'm not sure about Barrett. I haven't heard anything about Barrett or Red 13 yet, but they're not exactly the most popular characters in Final Fantasy VII. So maybe that'll be in episode 2. And we've seen too much at this point to really continue denying this. That Final Fantasy VII completely, I want to say failed as a remake, but that would be implying that this is a remake at all. It isn't. This is not Final Fantasy VII. This is an alternate universe continuation of time travel that incorporates time travel to change the original plot. Like, Square Enix is selling this Final Fantasy VII sequel as a remake of the original game and are trying to paint it as something it isn't, as a remake of this classic that modern audiences can enjoy. And individuals, like Maximilian Dude, Angry Joe, and I'm sure others, countless others, are praising and defending this decision, primarily because, well, it's bringing this classic game to modern audiences. So that in and of itself is worth defending. I don't mind waiting for the episodic releases. I don't care about like the plot changes or the gameplay changes. I just want modern audiences to experience Final Fantasy VII, and to me, that this is a major red flag because for one thing, I don't look at video games. I don't look at new, upcoming, exciting video games and think to myself, "Oh man, what are the modern audiences going to think about this?" No, I think about what I want, and what I wanted from this remake. Assuming what I wanted for this remake was for it to be on Nintendo consoles, and I wanted it to be an actual remake, an actual, updated visuals, updated translation, maybe some additional content, similar to what Nintendo does with Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, Kirby Superstar Ultra, Link's Awakening Switch. Nintendo completely nails this whole remake thing, far more so than the rest of the industry, far more so than modern Square Enix would. Well, again, I don't understand this. Final Fantasy IV DS was a perfectly satisfactory remake, right? Updated visuals, 3D models, voice acting, new features, rebalanced combat, very, very faithful to the original. And I am a fan of that game. And that really needs to be said here, is that, like, people who actually think that younger fans, people who didn't grow up with this shit, aren't going to be interested in this release are completely deluding themselves, because I grew up playing old games, okay? I grew up playing, Super Metroid after it was over 10 years old, like Super Mario World, later than that, right? Games like Majora's Mask, it took me a while to get through, right? Stuff like that. It was probably around 8 years old. 8 years old by the time I finally finished it. Oh, maybe not that old. When did I finish Majora's Mask? It took me a while. Um, all these N64 games, Banjo Kazooie, I first played in 2010, right? These classic video games are classics for a reason because people are going to stick with them and enjoy them for years to come. In fact, I first finished Final Fantasy VII in 2015, I want to say, and after there's an entire story about my experience with Final Fantasy VII in which, I tried to play it on PS2, I got a memory card, failed. I think I got another memory card. I kept trying to play through it with this memory card, right? This third party PlayStation 1 memory card that kept failing on me. I just barely managed to get through the original Metal Gear Solid, right? I'm shocked I did get through it, honestly. I played Final Fantasy VII over and over and over again. I kept losing all of my progress over and over and over again, and I kept getting more and more frustrated over and over again until I finally bought the game on PS3. I actually transferred my endgame data because what happened... because I still had the data to the... How did I do it? I somehow transferred my data from Final Fantasy VII to a... That's right. Yeah, that's right. I had a PS3 that had an internal PS1 memory card, but I didn't have the physical version of... I didn't have a digital version of Final Fantasy VII. I had an old fat PS1, right? PS3, and that could run PS1 games. So I popped in Final Fantasy VII into that after the PS2 failed. Like the PS1 memory card kept failing on me, and I played it using the internal memory card in that thing, but it couldn't read the second disc. Like I got to the end game of disc 2, right, where you fight the weapon. I can't remember what it is. Is it an Ultima weapon? Emerald weapon? I don't recall. That thing right before the final dungeon. You know what I mean? That thing. The thing with the giant lasers. The game crashed on me over and over and over again, and this was like near the end of the game. So like I was just like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. It's over. We're getting a digital version. So I bought a USB from Radio Shack like just before they went out of business, and I plugged it into the old fat PS3, ripped the data, downloaded the game on a newer PS3. Plugged a USB into that and put the data on there, and that's how I continued and finished Final Fantasy VII, a video game that literally spanned something like four video game consoles, right? Originally released on PS1, originally played on PS2, continued on PS3, having to be transferred to another PS3. I went through all of that, right? Like, I went through that entire ordeal because I legitimately really, really, really enjoyed Final Fantasy VII and wanted to see it through to the end, like, no matter what, right? Like, this is a game that very much deserves the praise and attention it gets, and I think finishing it has given me more of an appreciation for JRPGs as a whole, particularly in how like being mainstream didn't necessarily ruin the brand, right? Like Final Fantasy VII is still very much a great game in spite of appealing to a mass audience. The casualization is not in and of itself the problem because Nintendo is very, very good at appealing to all sorts of audiences while still retaining their credibility. No. Square completely lacks any real talent in making RPGs, putting out remakes, new material, new games, anything really. Like they keep failing in every single capacity. It took 5 years for this part 1 of Final Fantasy VII Remake to come out, and it's a complete disaster in every respect, right? Like I don't think most people can really. Is it out yet? Can I watch it on Twitch? I looked it up on YouTube, but maybe people are still playing it on Twitch. Maybe I could just stream that. Because I wanted to like do a. I wanted to. I wanted to talk about this game. Like I'll be talking about this game in depth more when we understand everything that's wrong with it. Like I'm absolutely sure that IGN is damage controlling how long the game is, because like that was the main concern that people were putting forward very early on, and I'm sure Square Enix and their shills in their marketing department are responding to that. But the the point I wanted to get across in this video, Final Fantasy VII needed to be remade. Like, not because, it was outdated, or because it wouldn't appeal to modern audiences, or because people wouldn't like it the way it was. People wanted to play Final Fantasy VII because it's so good, because it's so beloved, because it's remained so popular over the years, like legitimately popular. I do think it does legitimately have genuine fans, like people who actually like the brand, as opposed to people who are simply latching onto it because it's a popular PlayStation IP, which I think is what Angry Joe and Maximilian Dude are doing right now. It doesn't feel like. It doesn't feel like a lot of the hype around this remake is really legitimate, is what I'm getting at. Like, people are asking questions. People are, like, being very skeptical. I'm seeing a lot of people post about refunding the game because certain leaks have sort of certain information that's now available kind of showcases what I'm talking about. Like, this is not a faithful recreation of Final Fantasy VII, and as a result, is not worth paying attention to as a remake. It is an original game that is a shell of the original, and as a result, it's not really something that I personally would ever consider supporting.